Welcome to the Ripple of Change podcast, where we highlight, celebrate, and extol others in healthcare and beyond, doing amazing and wonderful and positive things. I'm going to do my best not to screw up this intro today, but I make no guarantees because that seems to be my shtick, I suppose. I'm Dr. Otten, and I'm joined today by Ally Jaffee, who is a junior doctor in the NHS system, specializing in psychiatry. But her work goes way beyond being a physician. Co-founder of NutriTank. Did I get that right? Yes, good. Okay. And also a trustee for Chemo Trust. Huge social media following, big advocate for mental health. We are thrilled to have Ally with us today as a guest co-host. And our guest is Melina Davis, who is the CEO and Executive Vice President of the Medical Society of Virginia. And in 2023, was honored with Virginia Women in Business Award. I'm gushing here a little bit, I'm not going to lie. It's been amazing to get to know Melina and her work over the past year, and I'm proud to have her on the show, and I'm also proud to call her a friend. So with that, I am thrilled to have these two amazing women join me today, and I'm going to hand it over to Ally.
Thank you so much for that wonderful intro. And it's great to have a fellow woman with me on the podcast, especially as we're both in pink, which the viewers won't be able to see, and just really celebrating female leadership and all things girl power. So thank you so much, Todd, for bringing us together. And Melina, your work around SafeHaven and really supporting physicians with their mental health and preventing suicide is something I'm so deeply passionate about. So just wanted to open up and hear a little bit about how the story started for you and how you got into this line of work.
Oh, thank you so much, Todd and Ally, for having me on. I'm really excited to be here today. You all are making such a huge difference. And just to be with you is, a great way to spend a morning, I will say. Talking about SafeHaven, the story I think is an interesting one in that at the Medical Society of Virginia, we represent physicians and physician assistants, now PAs, in the state of Virginia. And we could tell when they would come and visit with us that they would talk to us. They would tell us almost everything. We could see the burnout was rising, and we could hear in their stories that it was rising in our members and in our friends. We didn't understand why they would speak to staff who didn't have counseling degrees, were not professional coaches and so forth, but they would speak to us, but not their peers, not professionals. And we could see in some that they needed more help. We went on a listening tour after a conference where we even brought professionals to the table and could really see the deep trauma that was occurring. We went on a listening tour to understand really what was holding them back from getting deeper help. And we found some interesting things along the way, which now seem so apparent, but at the time, really, it just was not. We heard themes, a couple important themes: fear that their employer or the board of medicine would revoke their employment or their license if they even discussed burnout in any way or indicated that they may be struggling. There was fear that their mental health status would be discovered and that it would be held against them in medical malpractice trials or even in divorce proceedings and parental custody hearings, which we were finding out was a regular happening. And they didn't feel protected when they needed to seek help to address any sort of personal burnout concerns, that those things were discoverable in a way for licensees that weren't for the rest of us. In the US, we of course enjoy HIPAA protections, but as a licensee, you have to report so much. And there just was not clarity about not only what I had to report if I were a doctor about myself, but also if somebody else disclosed something. So in realizing that this fear was real, we went about doing what we are known to do, which is look at how we could advocate and improve the law. And so in Virginia, we became the first state in the country to pass protections for work-related career fatigue, burnout issues. And we now provide in Virginia a law that allows for confidentiality, which allows for the creation of SafeHaven itself under the guise of management by the medical society, but also provides confidentiality for clinicians seeking help to address career fatigue and other mental health issues. Immunity, where clinicians participating in the SafeHaven program will not be reported to the Board of Medicine unless they are not competent to practice or are a danger to themselves or others. And that really clarified that language on reportability. And the law also provides a sense of privilege so that consultations, which take place under the scope of the SafeHaven program, are considered privileged communications in the way that the rest of us enjoy HIPAA, which keeps the lowest standard of confidentiality from being provided and turns it into the highest that a Virginia court deems as privileged communication. Those things were very important. And of course, we realized as a staff that we didn't have the qualifications to provide actual resources and services. So we were very lucky to find a national partner, Vital Work Life, and we built together a program of services specifically designed for clinicians, one that provides not only counseling by master's level counselors, we also provide peer coaching. So that if you don't need a counselor, you might just need advice and somebody to talk to who understands and has gone through what you have, who can help you with practice advice, personal development advice, etc. We also made sure that all the services were available 24/7 so that you can call in for in-the-moment support. If it's 2 a.m. after a shift change, or you've had a tough day and you're driving home and you don't want to take that home, particularly grief can be difficult to take home into the workplace of losing a patient that you've worked with so closely. We also have a virtual concierge service, which sounds like an odd thing to offer, but what we found is clinicians don't like to ask for help and they're not very practiced at asking for help. And a concierge service is a very nice and easy way for them to start getting help, even if it's somebody spilled milk in the minivan on the way to my shift and I need somebody to come clean the milk up and it not sit there all day while I'm on shift taking care of patients. They can get help and just with life duties that when you're on shift work or you have to do double shifts, things in your life don't get taken care of. So it fits well into a clinician's life, but it also teaches them to ask for help. And then there are resources on an app and education and so forth. So we put all these together to make sure that whenever somebody needed help, they were the right customized kinds of help for clinicians, and that asking for help, you enjoy the protections. This has provided a ton of psychological safety in the space, which we found is vital. So hopefully that helps.
Just extraordinary, Melina. It just sounds like the most forward-thinking, holistic and necessary service. And we can talk a little bit about what's going on here in the UK, but I must say that this is the most all-rounded service I've probably ever heard of. And just huge congratulations to you that you went to the top of the board and you changed the legal side of it all to get these protections for the doctors and physicians and clinicians in the state of Virginia. So huge kudos to you. And can we clone you and bring you to the UK, please?
I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, that is so amazing.
It's so fun. Well, it's spreading now across the US too. Now we're already.
You are. How do you share good practice? How do you ensure the same quality and standard of care?
Yeah, thank you for asking for that. So we're in 6 states already where we worked with those state medical societies to make sure that the law is written properly for that state and well for that state. And then we have 6 others that either have partial protection and are in their evolution of bringing the full suite of protections. And then some others that are just beginning the journey. But we also worked with this national vendor, Vital Work Life, to help us make sure that they have the same package of services in each of these communities. And you'll see us beginning to add in the next year medical diagnosis and medical services as well, and adding partners to that process. I think Vital Work Life might join us in the medical piece as well, to some degree, so that we can expand that service. As we learn more, we know more and more what people need. And we know that, for instance, somebody might have anxiety, they might need counseling, but they might also need medication. And we believe that no matter who adopts this program, that it is evolutionary. We all have to keep learning and expanding and listening in the process. So.
No, that's brilliant. So when you say the evolutionary aspect and the adaptability, have you noticed that in different states, depending on the demographic of clinicians, races, ethnicity, genders, all the different cultural elements, that there are slightly different pressures within the hospital workplace? Or could you say that from state to state, things are pretty similar across the board?
You know, because I'm not in those states, it's harder for me to just say it. But what I would say is we do know from research and from experience with the program anecdotally, right? We never divulge anything personal. And at the Medical Society, we will never know the name of a person calling in or the personal identification of a person. But the stories that are allowed to be shared, we can tell there's definitely a difference in what people of different genders are dealing with, people who have different specialties, or what nurses contend with is slightly different than what doctors contend with. And in Virginia, we started with doctors and physician assistants, but now we've added nurses, pharmacists, students, and now dentists in this last year. And so among the professions, there are different considerations. And then people who have different gender identities, people who are struggling with violence differently, because there's more violence, for instance, in an ER and with nurses than there are, say, with neurologists or oncologists, interestingly. We see these differences, and it's why this peer coaching piece is so vitally important. We need peers who have contended with these things, who can help people cope, who can find skills to deal with it. But we're also listening to see, are there trends that we need to hear as they rise up? And do we need to take more action as a medical society legally, which is how we started to get to the medical. And we also did a violence in workplace piece of legislation because of things we were hearing from and the anecdotal pieces out of the counseling, that people really were struggling with violence in healthcare workplaces. And so in Virginia, we've doubled those fines. So they're quite high now. And that was the first of its kind in the country as well. So this evolution, we just need to keep really listening. And I think more things will come.
I think that's so wonderful. And what you've really highlighted is the power of co-production, which is something I'm so big on when you're trying to reform a service or improve research, is actually getting the service user that you're trying to serve, getting their input on what the changes they'd like to see, and understanding their personal circumstances and the context that you describe with different specialties. And it was very interesting what you mentioned about ER, what we call A&E here, and the specific violence issues that come up there, because it's such a intense environment and it's really life or death, and people are coming in literally off the street into that place of care. What other examples do you have with specific needs across different specialties and kind of quirky differences, if you will, with different specialties?
Oh, in fact, I wanted to ask you some quirky differences, so I'm curious.
I was just thinking, I'm like, that is a loaded question in terms of quirkiness between the specialties. It's interesting how you get like sort of certain personalities that go into certain specialties without a doubt. And I probably wouldn't do it justice to try and answer that question. But I mean,
so what do you think from you and your colleagues are your specific stresses compared to different specialties?
For me, well, it's interesting. When I was a family physician, I think probably the biggest, when I was a family physician, I'm still a family physician. When I was
You
actively
are.
practicing full time, is what I meant to say, I suppose. Gosh, I'm just so riveted by this conversation that I was listening and not even thinking about answering questions. Anyways, the biggest struggle for me was the clerical stuff. It was the paperwork. It was the box clicking, all this stuff. I have a t-shirt that says MD equals professional box checker. Because I had calculated how many clicks it took till I got burned out. And it was about 18 million clicks by
What?
the highest
What?
paid person in the office to do data entry. And I won't go on a tangent, right? Because that's not what we need to be doing here. But the point is the clerical burdens have created this huge time crunch in the United States where the interaction with the patient is limited to, 15 minutes or so. It's completely insane.
It's the same here in the UK. So general practice, what we call family physicians, general practice doctors, they are limited to 10 minutes per session with patient, and it is an entirely clerical burden job. And what happens is there's all these memes and TikToks and whatever where literally you don't make eye contact with the GP because you just have to tell them all your symptoms so they can just tap 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 tap. And I feel deeply sorry that is the profession they went into, and this is the outcome in action and in practice. And the issue that we're actually experiencing right now here in the UK, which is horrific for my general practice colleagues, is there is actually it's a really hard time for them in terms of employment. And it sounds really crazy because you may have heard in the UK it's very hard to see a GP and there's a lot of but believe it or not, GPs can't get jobs at the moment. And why is that? Because the funding is ring fenced in general practice at the moment to employ more physician associates, and there is some funding, but the funding is ring fenced to employ them and not enough funding to employ GPs. So we're now living in a world where primary care is being dominated by physician associates. And there's been stories in the news this week of 3 GPs, 2 going to be Uber drivers, 1 going to work in Tesco's, which is a market chain here, because they can't find work. But then the disconnect is the public can't see a GP. And
yes,
it's a mess.
Yes. It's a mess.
Problem. It's crazy.
Holy smokes, that is a huge issue because, I mean, you'll get some cost savings in the short term, but think about the ripple or trickle on effect, if you will, of the costs down the line from things that were missed or problems that could have been dealt with sooner. Wow, that is
and a lot of the data shows that people that haven't gone through full medical school training actually need to utilize more testing to get any insight. And so it ends up being oddly more expensive with less experience at the table to actually diagnose.
Okay, that I didn't know. And now I'm going to absolutely share that with all my colleagues who are really passionate in this space. That's very interesting. And it's not that I'm against physician associates in any ways.
No.
Delightful experience working with them in same-day emergency care, A&E, all those places. But I think it is deeply saddening that GPs are being pushed out by them. And that's the system's fault, not the profession's fault.
Well, and it's interesting, whenever I talk to a patient too, and they know I work with doctors, right? So they say, my doctor won't spend any time with me. My doctor won't do this. My doctor doesn't want to be with me. And I said, in fact, that's the opposite of the truth. In fact, they would rather be with you than do any other part of their job in most cases. That's where they get the joy, and that's where why they went to school was to help people and help you, but they're not allowed. And they say, what do you mean they're not allowed? Who tells them what to do? I think people don't understand, patients do not understand that it's not just frustrating practice-wise to sit there and tap, but it's also heartbreaking to know that you're letting somebody down and they believe it's because you don't want to be with them and you don't care about them, when in fact you're connected to them anyway. And that there's a form of grief and moral injury that happens because you can't have that connection in that moment. And that somehow business leaders have decided that's healthier for all of us, at least healthier for the bottom line.
There's so much to unpack in that. I just want to stand up and cheer because I agree with you 100%. I loved seeing patients loved it. It was the best part of the day. And when that was going well, my days would just fly by in this magical, fun way. But when all the other, excuse my language, bullshit gets piled on top of us, it becomes incredibly frustrating. And honestly, that was a big part of the reason why I wrote the book with Joshua, my co-author.
Powerful book.
Well, thanks, Melina. And I don't normally talk about it in the context, but it just seemed right. Like, the reason we wrote it was to rip the Band-Aid off, pull back the curtain so people could see what was going on, not just from the physician's perspective, but the patient's perspective, and how those frustrations would intertwine. And interestingly enough, Joshua, after we were going through the process, and he thought back on it, he's like, no wonder why that visit sucked. You were so burned out, and your head was in such another place, and you were just struggling to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
How in God's green earth could you take care of everybody on your schedule that day? Sorry, I digress. I can't help myself.
It actually leads me on to what I wanted to ask Melina, and it's exactly what you're talking about. So if we're talking about moral injury and physicians, doctors feeling right at their tether, burnt out, and we have this wonderful service, SafeHaven, let's talk about what the NHS is absolutely obsessed with, because it all comes down to funding, numbers, and data. So in terms of data and evaluation, what is the social return on investment for I don't know what your system is, a hospital system in Virginia, hospital, for a single, what we say, trust here, to take on SafeHaven as a service and pay for it? What's the social return?
That's a great question. SafeHaven's about 3.5 years old now. So the data that we have is primarily based in utilization, but these are important pieces. So about 1% or less of physicians will use a service like this. So if an employer's, and most are, offering an employee assistance program, less than 1% of their doctors are using it, and less than 3% of their nurses are using it, right? And if it costs up to $1 million a year to replace a doctor, right? There's nothing being provided, but it's being paid for, but not provided, where a clinician will use it, right? So that's data point number one. Number two, with SafeHaven, because of the psychological safety provided by the protections and the services, 48% of people that, when their employer offers it, are utilizing it actively. 19% are using coaching and counseling. So, and it's unprecedented in the country. There is no other program or service where you're getting that kind of utilization by a clinician. And then what we're seeing, early results, self-reported results, are a 14.3% increase in well-being after just 3 average visits. And when we offer SafeHaven, we don't just offer it to the clinician, we offer it to their entire family, because we know that these are not always just work-related stressors that are at play, and that you don't separate work from your personal life, right, all of the time. And so that in one case, we had a radiology oncologist who was really stressed out, called in, and it was not so much work. It was that he was so worried about his daughter. His daughter has going through a divorce. She was going through a new change in career. There were other things going on with her mental health, and she kept calling him constantly at work, and during the day. And it was really putting him under stress and helping him sort of really degrade. And so he called in at the suggestion of a peer in the workplace where they offered SafeHaven. He got a peer coach. The coach then helped him come up with coping mechanisms, but he also then saw a counselor after being assessed himself to manage his stress. And then he convinced his daughter to also get counseling, right? So that it became a whole family solution. And so when you say the social impact, right, I think we're still getting, we're getting better at measuring. It's going to take us a while, because we have to guard people's privacy. And so a lot of this has to be self-reported right now. But what we're seeing and hearing are these kinds of stories, in addition to watching this utilization and movement. And now I think we're about to announce in the next few months, a major hospital system is going to help us correlate the data that they're seeing in turnover and in their surveys of burnout and this SafeHaven program. So my hope is that we'll have more, at least in that microcosm, that we can report. This stuff's hard because nobody wants to talk about it.
That's so true. And in terms of anecdotally, obviously you don't have the perfect longitudinal data, you're 3 years old, but wow, the impact you've made already with just stories like that. Do you ever have the opportunity of capturing the impact it has indirectly on the patient? To go back to Todd's story and his amazing co-produced book with his patient Joshua, who then had compassion and sympathy for his doctor, hearing about what was going on in his internal world, and no wonder you couldn't deliver your best care to me because you were so burnt out. Is there a way of capturing that with the patients that of the doctors that you serve?
I think there's a way. And in fact, this hospital system that we're talking to right now, they're going to connect their patient safety data for us, which I think will be the first of its kind study in the United States of this kind. I'm excited to see it, but we intuitively understand, and there is a lot of research around that, the connection with your provider, right, with your clinician is really important to a patient's recovery, right, and how well a patient does. And if they are connected in a positive relationship, that the healing can happen faster and better. So it's just an intuitive leap, right, to say that if the reverse is true, or that doctor is not well and not connected, and I don't feel like they want to be with me, that can actually have a negative effect, right? So can we connect these data points? And part of it is, it's going to be tricky because it's going to have to be correlated versus direct, unless we have clinicians who feel comfortable enough, right, to go outside of the protection bubble. And at this point, the stigma in healthcare and medicine is so huge as it relates to this. And the reporting to the licensing boards is so important to a career, right? To do a direct study would be, I think, nearly impossible right now.
I know, it's so challenging. And I guess being a doctor, I kind of have this hypothesis of happy doctors equals good patient care. But to actually prove that is really hard. And over in the UK, myself and my team at NutriTank, who are all about improving nutrition and lifestyle education within healthcare to prevent chronic disease, we're working on a national study looking at the impact of the occupational food environment and the impact that has on doctors' well-being, especially on call and on nights when the hospital canteens close. So they're just left with the hospital ultra processed vending machine options. So we've got 500 plus data points from doctors all across the UK and Scotland, you know, really, really good spread data. And we're trying to look at, well, if they are hungry, if they are eating non-nutrient dense food, so nutrient poor food, ultra processed food, can we see that their rate of burnout can go up? And can we somehow prove that maybe that will have an impact on reactivity with colleagues and also patient care and patient safety? But it's early days, we're writing it up. Yeah.
Ooh, I can add some anecdotal evidence on that one personally. That's incredible, by the way. I love this. I love these connections that happen because of this and the conversations. I have chills just listening to the two of you. And Ally has for those of you listening, Ally has a butterfly on her sweatshirt today, and I can't help but think of like the butterfly effects hopefully as a result of this conversation. But I was thinking,
obsessed. I've got a butterfly tattoo. There's a butterfly on my wedding veil. I have a thing about butterflies, so there we go.
Oh, there it is. It is, well, and it's a great sweatshirt, to be honest with you. It's so cool. So I was thinking back when I was a surgical intern in 2002. It was before the 80-hour work week. And my record for being in the hospital that week was 124 hours.
Oh my gosh. Todd.
There's only 148 hours in the week. So we do the math as to how much I slept and whatever. The point I was trying to make is I lost 15 pounds And I wasn't a big guy. I could stand to lose 15 pounds now, but back then I probably didn't have it to lose. And I was an angry little man because I was sleep deprived. And oh my gosh,
Hangry.
yeah, sleep deprived, eating out of vending machines, not the best stuff. I mean, if I can't imagine how many meals I missed in those first few months, and how does that affect not just me, but all those around me? That's just not right.
It's not right. And we hear stories constantly, a lot from surgeons as well, but not just surgeons, right? Anesthesiologists, others, where they choose not to eat or drink for an entire shift, which can be longer than 12 hours, depending on what's happening, right? Eat or drink because they don't have time, personal time, to go to the bathroom or go find food, right? As a result. Right. That's insane. So we've got a workforce that's saving the rest of our lives, but they haven't had nutrition or liquid for 12 hours. And we keep saying to people, we really need you all to start thinking about self-care, right? Brushing your teeth, drinking something, sleeping and eating are things the rest of us sort of think as normal self-care of every day. But doctors on a regular basis are giving this up for us, for patients. And I don't think any of us would expect that. And none of us understand that it could have an effect on how well you can feel yourself and what the degradation to you as a person, as it adds up, what that can mean to us. And not only you, right?
Exactly. It's that whole system thing, because you're ratty or hangry or whatever adjective we're using, and you have a go at your nurse or your physician associate or whatever, and then they are just disappointed and carrying that burden around them all day because they've had reactivity from their boss, and then live a bad patient or you're not compassionate towards a relative when you're breaking boundaries. It's this whole kind of psychosocial ripple effect. And I think it's so interesting that we have surgeons, and I did 6 months of surgery as a foundation doctor. I watched them for 9 hours, again, not pee, not eat, and I was like, wow, you guys superhuman. But then I just said to them, I just don't, how do you do it and why do you do it?
They shouldn't be doing it.
It's kind of crazy at the same time, and I don't want to kind of validate that I think it's like cool and impressive, because I think it's actually crazy. And what I think is really interesting, I've lost my train of thought.
It's crazy but interesting. Yes.
That is quite all right. This is probably the perfect segue to a Ripple Challenge question. So I'm going to throw the Ripple Challenge question out there. Wait, hold on. We'll hold the Ripple Challenge question. Let's go back to the train of thought.
So I guess I'm starting my specialty training in psychiatry. I've worked 3 years so far as a doctor, and the area I'm most passionate about is this area of lifestyle psychiatry and nutritional psychiatry, which you guys are way ahead of the game than us here in the UK. Well, you guys in Australia. And so much science has come out now, really connecting our guts and our brains and showing the impact that food has on mood and cognition and even memory. We've got studies now showing that the hippocampus, the part of your brain that's responsible for memory, that shrinks with ultra processed food and westernized diets. So if you want to be a competent caregiver doctor, you want to have good cognition, you want to have better control over your emotional regulation and reactivity, and you want to be happy to deliver good care and have good memory and reduce brain fog. And we know how important nutrition is for that. So I think it is kind of crazy that these superhuman surgeons are able to do these life-saving surgeries running on empty. I don't understand.
Running on empty. I hate this word superhuman, because I think it definitely extends the stigma, right? Versus superhero is a choice in a moment to go in and be brave and take care of the situation. But what happens with the superhuman culture is that we expect that to be every day, that you act over and above what your body and your brain and your gut and your mind can handle. Constantly, consistently. That's leading to breakdown and burnout.
I agree 100%. I agree 100. You know, I'm on board with all of this. I'm always watching the clock. We got to make sure that we don't go on forever. This conversation has been brilliant. It is chock full of amazing things that are happening, both here in the United States and also in the UK. So I thank you both for joining me today. But I do want to do a Ripple Challenge question because I think it'll be fun, and I've been dying to deliver this one. And then after that, I would love to give you both the opportunity to impart maybe one final thought, one area of hope or optimism, whatever you want. That's your opportunity to use that time to share with the world. And also, please, when we do that, tell us, or tell the audience rather, how they can find you, get a hold of you, what links you have. This is the time for shout outs and all that good stuff. So the Ripple Challenge question, there's no rules to this. Answer however you like. I'm going to ask Ally first. What is your favorite, and you can give more than one answer if you so choose. What is your favorite football or football team?
I'm not following. Football.
American football or
Oh,
UK
was
football.
joking there. Oh, I see. So you were trying to say it in my accent. Okay, so it was American football.
Epic fail on my part. You know, that's the beauty of this. I screw things up and people laugh and realize we're all human beings.
Make me laugh, but I sometimes jokes just fall on deaf ears with me. Right. I don't follow any American football. I would not even be able to say a name. Actually, the only name of a team I would know is because of David Beckham is like LA Galaxies or something like that. Because of
Well, no.
Don't know.
Oh, I was hoping that you would go with perhaps your significant other's football team.
Definitely no. And then I was coming on to the UK. So America, I have no idea what's going on with you guys in the football scene there. I think it's all very strange and foreign to me. And then in the UK, my fiance is a diehard Arsenal fan. We've both grown up in North London, and he lives for it. And for one of our, I think, anniversaries or something, I got him a very special football book, which I showed Todd before, and it's all the newspaper cuttings of every Arsenal success. I'm not that bothered, though, to be completely honest.
That was great. That was a perfect answer to the question. Absolutely
love it.
Perfect from start to finish.
I'm not a sports gal. I'm obsessed. You can ask me about theatre. I'm obsessed with Broadway and the West End Theatre here in London, but no, nothing about sports.
See, if you had asked me about theater, Ally, I would have done the exact same thing. I would have been like, Melina, how about you? One or two, or as many answers as you would like?
Well, I just want to thank you for going with Ally first, just so you know. Thank you, Ally, for fielding that, because I would have fumbled way more than you. But you know, having gone to undergrad here in the U.S., I have to say that my college football team is my favorite, and that is the Carolina Gamecocks. Even though we never win the big game, we have the best tailgates in all of the SEC. That's, what I have to say about that.
Because I've got American friends, but that would be a foreign term to any British person. But I've been to a tailgate party or like a prees or whatever you call it, and I had a lot of fun.
Very fun parking lot party for hours. I highly recommend it. But I do love to watch the Gamecocks. And then here's the thing. I know nothing about UK football, but what I will say is I was obsessed with Ted Lasso, and now I feel like I should like it and follow it more because, there's a lot to be learned.
And a word on that Ted Lasso show, I resisted it for so long because I thought it would be too cringe for me. I watched it, I fell in love, and all the male mental health themes that came through about
incredible.
Ted's father by suicide, Ted suffering from anxiety. I've never seen a show so skillfully and joyfully talk about mental health in that way. So just give up Ted Lasso for that reason.
I know.
I don't care about football.
I literally cried when it ended because I was like, oh my gosh, no, where are they going? Where are they going? They can't go. I can't think of his first name. Sudeikis. What's his first name? Who developed
Jason.
Yes, who developed that. He's a genius with a brilliantly large heart all of
Greg
us.
Goldstein as well. So the footballer captain in the first season, who then becomes part of the management team, Roy, who's like speaks like this.
Roy,
Greg Goldstein, who's a Jewish guy from London, so big up him. He co-wrote it as well, and I actually
brilliant.
cousin, so it's
I
kind
did
of
not know that. That's brilliant.
This is so good. I love when the questions go like this, and I could just sit back and listen and smile and laugh. And oh my goodness, I'm going to just give a very short answer. I do like the Chicago Bears. My family's from Chicago, which creates some issues.
The Bears.
Yeah, being in Michigan though creates some issues with the Lions fans. And anyways, and I'm obvious. Most of my friends know that I'm a huge Arsenal supporter. Taking the kids to a couple games over there. So go Gunners. We'll leave it at that. I want to
love it.
Woo!
Say that again, Ally.
Red Army.
Yeah, amen. When
I've been told to go to a few games, I just get involved because I think it's so funny and comical, like grown men chanting and going crazy. So I just scream, "Red Army, Red Army!"
Well, and no, and speaking of, the not eating in the bathroom thing, like nobody gets up during the game. Like everybody's in at the beginning. Nobody gets up for the first half. At halftime, there's this mad dash where everyone goes to get a beverage and then right back down to the end of the game. Anywho, but I'd like to turn it back over to the both of you to offer a final and parting thought, whatever you'd like to talk about. And then please tell the audience how they can get a hold of you, if you would.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I'm happy to go. So I guess what I want to fill the audience with is hope. And you'll know a little bit about this, Todd, because I told you about it. But last week, I went to one of the most revolutionary conferences in London called the Wounded Healer. It was a 2-day conference, and it was all about doctors' mental health. And it was run by NHS Practitioner Health, which is a slightly similar service to SafeHaven, but doesn't have this emergency 24/7 helpline that you mentioned, which I wish they did, but they provide incredible counselling, therapy and psychiatric care for doctors struggling. And believe it or not, the funding nearly got stripped from them this year, but there was a public campaign to say, no, it's helped so many doctors, NHS, you need to fund this. Anyways, I digress. But this Wounded Healer conference was organised by NHS Practitioner Health and a charity here called Doctors in Distress. And for 2 days, I sat and listened to doctors who were more senior than me, some were at the same level as me, talking about their struggles with mental health or how they've lost a colleague to suicide. And this charity, NHS Practitioner Health, has actually put a directory together of all the doctors in the UK that have lost their life to suicide and to honour them. And they've now said that September the 18th, I think you guys have had this day already as a remembrance day for doctors who died of suicide, but we're all really celebrating and honouring those doctors this autumn. And it was just filling with so much hope. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe where I was. It was my first time. It wasn't the first time they've run it, but it was the first time that I was there. And I was like, wow, I'm not alone. I'm a junior doctor that struggled with their mental health, and I sadly lost my grandfather, who was a doctor in South Africa, to suicide when I was 2 weeks old. I didn't know him, but the story is very deeply upsetting. And so it's just incredible to be in that space where people are open and talking about research and evaluation of different services and support groups. So I just want to fill people with hope that there is a change in openness, and we can't go on how we've gone on. Look at COVID. Look how many doctors lost their lives to either COVID or the stresses of COVID by taking their life. And the stat in the UK here is a doctor dies by suicide every 3 weeks, and it's sickening. And I just want to be part of the change going forward to really ensure that we do better. So that's me really. So check out the charities I mentioned.
Well, that is amazing, and we'll have some links in the show notes for sure. But do you want to shout out for the listeners any specific websites or that kind of thing? Ally, go for it.
So NHS Practitioner Health and Doctors in Distress, they are wonderful charities here in the UK. NHS Practitioner Health have the service that's clinical for doctors who need it, and then Doctors in Distress on reflective spaces, support groups. They do a book club around different books written by doctors as well, and I've joined quite a few sessions there. And I guess I just get a lot of hope and good feeling from people I follow on social media as well, who are talking about this change as well. And I guess my favorite person in the doctor's mental health space is one of your lot, which I wish he was here, is Dr. Jake Goodman, who's a psychiatry resident who does the most amazing job around reducing stigma and discrimination around mental illness. So yeah, check out all these wonderful people. And I've done a few podcasts with NHS Practitioner Health. So yeah, and they've done a really great job.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And Melina, we're going to pass it over to you.
Well, first, I want to just say, Ally, you're so inspiring. It's so just energetic. I think you're exactly the voice that people need to hear on this issue. So thank you for everything you're doing. The message I'd want to give is empowerment. You can bring these kinds of protections and services to your workplace. You can bring them to your state. I really encourage people to reach out to their state medical society. We know that having the state medical society champion this issue locally with that medical board, with the trial lawyers in your state and so forth, to work together to bring this is really psychologically empowering and important to provide this safety. So number one, reach out to your state medical society. Number two, reach out to us at SafeHaven. We really want to help you figure out what you can do, how you can engage, who you can call. So you can reach us either by email at safehavenhealth@msv.org, or you can go to our website, which I really encourage you to do because there are a lot of resources there, which is safehavenhealth@msv.org. Is that right? No, it's not right. I'm not giving you the right. No, here it is, www.safehavenhealth.org. Sorry, you'll have to edit that time.
No problem. No problem at all.
I would just really encourage people, ask your national specialty society to get involved, start to advocate for this issue as normal and expected in every workplace, every profession. We have got to embrace this idea that we're allowed to deal with our burnout out loud. We're allowed to address stigma and break these barriers down. You're allowed to be healthy and human. You're allowed to be human and healthy. So become one of the advocates like Ally. It helps.
Melina, that was so well said. You're allowed to be human and you're allowed to be healthy as a health provider.
As a health provider.
Talking about this, I wanted to just briefly mention, and I think I told you about this, Todd, as well, but Dr. Melina Davis is a wonderful consultant psychiatrist attending here in the UK, and she's in charge of wellbeing and retention at the Royal College of Psychiatry here. And she produced a report through a special fellowship called the Churchill Fellowship, where you're funded to travel to another part of the world to learn about their good practices. And believe it or not, she went to you guys. So
nice.
Dr. Ananta went to the States to shadow Dr. Michael Myers and learn about his brilliant clinical services where doctors are treating doctors. And she brought it back to the UK, wrote up this report, and has some key recommendations about how we in the UK can prevent doctor suicide. And I really do believe that it's really on the Royal College of Psychiatrists' radar now. And so I'd love to share that piece of work, the PDF in the show notes too.
That'd be great.
Absolutely. Oh, go ahead, Melina.
The only thing I'd say too is that we're going into Central Europe, I think, in the next year with SafeHaven. Poland has invited us to come and help, not just with clinician burnout, but also to start to work on an institute around PTSD to help deal with a lot of what the population and some of the folks from the Ukraine are dealing with. So we're excited to take part in that, but we'd love to learn and have an exchange with you all, Ally. If there's anything we can do together, I think what we believe is there's a tipping point, right? And it doesn't have to just happen in a bubble in the US or a bubble in the UK or in Poland. I think we can start to cross-pollinate, and it might help us all tip the scale faster.
So true. And one of Dr. Ananta's recommendations is to create a centre of excellence here in the UK, which obviously can have visiting professionals like yourself from all over the world to learn from a data and evaluation point of view what good practice looks like, so we can really share it and not work in our silos, exactly what you said, and not duplicate work. Because if you've got a great model, why do we need to reinvent the wheel and spend resource on that? So I'm going to introduce you to all the UK lot here, Melina, so that hopefully there can be sort of collaboration.
Love it.
This is amazing. And honestly, and obviously we're going to clip a fair amount of this stuff out at the end, unless you want me to keep a lot of it in there. But this is why I'm having so much fun with this, because it's two individuals who have synergy that may or may not have known one another. And all of a sudden, I've seen some magic result as it. So I'm going to give a little outtake here, and then we'll end it, and we'll sign off.
Okay.
Brilliant.
This was incredible, and ironically, I think it speaks to the power of 1+1. Joshua, Judy, and I just released a little video clip from our first keynote that we did together, where you had a doctor and a patient delivering the keynote at the same time and going back and forth on our story. Super proud of that. Albeit, we're novices with that, so there's going to be some failure bows in there or what have you. Anyways, but please check out our website, www.ourquadrupleaim.com. Should just be refreshed and revamped at this point. And as always, what positive ripple of change will you create today?
Grab your copy today. Ripple of Change is available in hard, soft, and ebook formats. More information at www.ourquadrupleaim.com. Thanks for listening, and let's turn ripples into waves of lasting change. Stay tuned to this podcast as we search for examples of our quadruple aim.